A long, long time ago in a universe far, far away, there was this thing called film. You remember? It was made out of plastic. And when you exposed it to light, an image fastened on it. And if the exposure wasn't just right, the image was blurry, or too light, or too dark. It was not capturing what your eye was telling your mind that your eye had seen. And believe it or not, in this faraway universe, people came up with this idea of stringing these pieces of film together in sequence, a multitude of captured images, and then running that film over projected light. And what you saw was a moving picture. It looked more like what your eye saw, unless you'll remember if you sped up or slowed down the projection, which usually made the images seem quite funny, either like Charlie Chaplin running very fast or slow motion. But if you stopped the moving picture altogether, you would realize that you could see things that you hadn't even noticed when you were making the moving picture. The goofy smile or the grimace that had moved past so quickly, or the dog poking her head up above the table. And I offer this example as a means of beginning to understand how we can practice the beauty of God's love. The Bible is full of exclamations about the unsurpassed beauty of God's love and mercy and tenderness. How beautiful is your love, O God. Your steadfast love is from generation to generation. The psalmists go on and on. But the truth is, I think, that it's very hard for most of us to believe this beauty of God's love. And by believe, I mean see it in real time as it's happening. Because the images are moving too quickly. By believe, I mean it's hard to reflect on in retrospect unless you've been through a terrible danger or catastrophe and come out the other side. And everything has slowed down for you. But otherwise, our lives move so fast. Or our eyes and our heart are blurred by our emotions. Either too much exposure or too little exposure, too light or too dark. That we're unable to see it clearly as it really happens or it really did happen. And therefore, God's love cannot become our frame of reference. Now, the Bible also tells us that the person of Jesus was the best image of God's love. For God so loved the world that he sent his Son. But even that, if we're honest, is hard to capture in a picture in our hearts. There's a guy in our stories in the Bible, a guy who lived far, far away in a very strange culture with very different customs, who spent a lot of time telling stories to people who came from that culture and lived very different lives than we did. He was very kind to people, which we understand because we're all raised to be kind people. He performed miracles, which is something that many, if not most of us, secretly or openly discount because we've never seen a picture of that. We know he was killed unjustly, which we understand because it happens all the time in the world. But then he was raised from the dead by God, which, like the miracles, many of us try to work our way around in our minds. because our eyes have never seen anything like that. And we don't know how to capture that image, what that picture would look like. But I'd like you to think of it this way. Jesus did the things he did, meaning to be images of God's love. That was what he was trying to do. Imagine if the Bible could slow down and there was this interjection. See this? This is what God's love is like, looks like. That's all the miracles really are. Jesus' way of saying, do you see this? Do you really see the enormity of what just happened here? This person who couldn't walk and now can. This person who couldn't see but now can. This person who couldn't talk but now can. This woman possessed by demons, now free. And Jesus says this is what God's love looks like. And if that idea is too hard to bring out in the dark rooms of your spiritual lives, just translate the miracles into parables, which I'll do right now. So one time Jesus was with his friends, and he was saying to them, the kingdom of God is like, well, it's like there are thousands of people roaming around, poverty-stricken people, roaming around in the countryside of life where it's dark and unfamiliar and they're far from whatever place it is that they call home. And they're not sure actually what they're doing out there roaming around, but they're looking for something. They're not even sure what. But they know that it's something that's very different from what they're used to seeing. And they hear about this ordinary man who's doing extraordinary things, what people call miracles or flashes of God's love. And they find him in a big field by a lake. And he invites them all to sit down. Now this man had friends, 12 of them in fact, and they were all as ordinary as he was, and as ordinary as all the people who were in the field were. In fact, they were sort of wandering around. They were far from home, and they didn't know what was going to happen next. And they saw these people, and they panicked. How are we going to possibly feed all these people? Better to send them away. We only have enough food for the 13 of us. A couple loaves of bread, maybe 4, and a couple fish. But the man gathers what they have, and he asks God to bless it, which is just a way of saying, God, please shine through what we have so everyone can see your love, your mercy, your tenderness in these things like bread and fish. See your great goodness, even if it only looks on the outside like a regular old peasant luncheon. And he sends them out to start to hand out the food, and they do. And they get to the end, and they discover that they have had enough for everyone to eat, enough to satisfy themselves. And then when the meal is finished, there are leftovers, so that each of the friends who went out with some came back with a basket full, as much as he possibly could carry. And then Jesus would have said, anyone with ears, listen. Now, each frame of this moving picture that I just painted for you needs to be slowed down so that the eye of our heart can actually see it and capture the image and appreciate the reality. Sadly, most of the time, we watch it at normal speed, or we even speed it up. We can't see it, and therefore, we can't believe it. Which is exactly how we are unable to see the miracles, the exploding flashbulbs of God's life, God's love in our very real lives right now. The very loaves and fish of our lives which we've been living all these years and not seeing for what they are. Being unable to slow down the images of our lives and see all the goodness. From remembering the frosting on our first birthday cake, to the smell of a new mown pasture, first one of the summer. Each image beautiful in itself. But then compress all those images, all 55 years of images in my heart, into one flash. Every moment of goodness in our lives, overlaid one on top of the other, but not blurring each other. Still being able to see and savored in the lived specifics and appreciated. Like an unexpected and utterly satisfying meal of fresh bread and fish on a hillside with neighbors and friends. But all at once. The saying we have is, my life flashed before my eyes. And imagine if you could see your life flash before your eyes. That's how beautiful God's love is. And it's worth taking the time on a Saturday afternoon regularly to slow down and remember. Because when you do, and I say this for myself, it changes how you see the other 6 days of the week. And you'll find yourself start seeing flashbulbs of light going off all over the place as the beauty just unfolds around you.